easier. Standalone HEIs and professional education institutions will evolve into multidisciplinary institutions. We have at the moment several technology or technological universities, medical universities, legal universities, and so on. Idea is that you should incorporate them into a general university type structure so that they do not stand alone. Special education zone for disadvantaged regions. This has been identified in each state. Karnataka, for example, they have identified which regions require extra effort to bring them up to par. So these are called special education zones, just like special economic zones. National Institute for Pali, Persian, and Prakrit, looking at the ancient languages. National Educational Technology Forum, NETF, and MHRD to be renamed as Ministry of Education, which has already been done. So many of these policy directions, some effort has been made to move forward. There are some essential principles of this policy. This is of interest to university leaders. I won't spend too much time on this. They describe the purpose of the education system. Why do you set up an education system? Of course, it existed. It should develop good human beings and so on. You can read this later on. And looking at constitutional provisions and how do we achieve these constitutional provisions? So what does the Constitution say? It says that we should produce engaged, productive, and contributing citizens for building an equitable, inclusive, and plural society. These have, as you see, constitutional implications and depends upon the government which is governing the country. They also define what a good educational institution is. This is information derived from the policies of other countries, for example. I won't read through that, but simply it states that every student should feel welcomed and cared for in every institution. So the institution cares for the student, his interests, his ideas, his creative, latent talents, and so on. So attaining these qualities must be the goal of every educational institution. So maybe many of us are doing it because in your strategic plans, in your missions, you indicate what you're aiming to do. So this must include the four ideas that have been mentioned above, and also seamless integration and coordination. Now let us specifically focus on higher education, quality universities and colleges. In education, as in every other sector, both quality and quantity are important. Quality in terms of excellence that you achieve, quantity in terms of the scaling up. Whatever ideas you have, it must apply to the entire population as much as possible. It's not enough if you have a small number of institutions which have good quality. All institutions must have good quality. That's basically the meaning of this statement. Higher education, why is it important? It is important for both economic reasons as well as even political reasons, but importantly, socio-economic, social reasons. So in the Constitution, what it says is that we should create a society which is democratic, socially conscious, cultured, and humane nation. These are all statements which are general in nature, but whatever implementation you do of the policies must incorporate these quantities, these qualities at the background. So it must give sustainable livelihoods and economic development of the nation, sustainable livelihoods for individuals and economic development of the entire nation. India is moving towards a knowledge economy and society, so more and more young people will aspire for higher education. They also have tried to identify the major problems currently faced by our higher education system. A number of them are listed here. And one of the last one here, the limited teacher and institutional autonomy, has been a real problem for many institutions over the years. So the focus here is on institutional autonomy as well as teacher autonomy. What does autonomy mean? It means you have the freedom to choose who you admit, what kind of teachers teach them, what do they teach them. So freedom to do this. Many institutions which are affiliated, they are constrained because they have to follow what the rest of the university follows and what the university dictates. But here, it is to free them from these constraints. And therefore, many changes are required for the current system. Not everything is fine. Many changes which are required. And here are some of the ideas that have been proposed, that we should move to a higher educational system where we have a large multidisciplinary universities and colleges. We have, as of the present time, about 10,000 engineering, 1,000 universities, and a large number of about 40,000 is the count, 40,000 colleges. So you must actually transform them through suitable policy initiatives into a smaller number of large multidisciplinary universities and colleges. And the medium of instruction to be in local Indian, not all of them, but the possibility of offering engineering and even medicine in local and Indian languages. We'll look at the implications of this in a minute. So largely it means we need to have a more multidisciplinary undergraduate education, faculty and institutional autonomy, and so on. Establishment of a national research foundation to fund outstanding peer-reviewed research. At the moment, it is fragmented. There are many parts of the educational system which offer this kind of funding, but here it is trying to focus into a single apex body, the National Research Foundation. And governance, which is an extremely important part of a university system. You know, TechWhip, Professor Natarajan pointed out, that is a technical education improvement program. It is the World Bank supported, and as well as our central government. They had an equal amount of support given to it. We have gone through 3 phases of this technical education quality improvement program. And it was found that, yes, you can increase the quality of undergraduates, the quality of postgraduates and research. But if an institution has to be counted among the global universities of eminence, then the governance is the most important thing. What does governance mean? It essentially means how the university functions as a unit, and the departments are units. And essentially, it is guided by the Board of Governors. I'm sure you have a Board of Governors. Many institutions really do not appreciate the role of the Board of Governors. What is it supposed to do? How is it selected? How does it function? And so on. Essentially, it has to guide the strategic plan to be decided upon by the institution, which basically means long-term plan. Over the next 10 years, what is it that we want to do and where do we reach in a sense of scale, quantity, as well as quality, excellence. So it is the governing body which is responsible for identifying these goals and then make the director and the vice chancellor and the faculty responsible for achieving these goals. That is the role of the Board of Governors. And they talk a lot about light but tight regulation, a single regulator. What does that mean? It means you do not have too many regulations, that is light, but then whatever regulations you propose, strict enforcement of this regulation. It appears quite logical, and increasing access, etc. Now, what are the different transformations we want to achieve? First, the regulatory system, and then the accreditation system, and so on. Regulation, they make some criticisms of the existing system. I'm not completely in agreement with many of these statements, but too much has been attempted to be regulated with too little effect. I really do not understand what that means. Anyway, So we have four basic functions in the overall regulatory system. This comes up with the fourth paragraph. Regulation, that means to say the setting up of institutions and then defining the rules and regulations of how it should function. Accreditation, which is related to quality assurance. Funding. Let me point out that education is a highly resource-intensive sector. You need a lot of funds, a vitamin M as it is called. So funding, without funding, you will not reach any goals. And academic standard setting. What are the basic standards under which the institution must perform by distinct, independent, empowered bodies? So they also point out that there are concentrations of power in the present system. Again, I do not understand very much. So one umbrella entity is to be created, a new entity, and this is the Higher Education Commission of India. So you must get used to new terms and new acronyms. For example, UGC and AICTE, all of us understand. So here is a new acronym, Higher Education Commission of India. It will be the apex body. In the older system, when the other government, UPA government was in power, it used to be called by another name. But at the moment, the new name is Higher Education Commission of India. So there are four verticals. First vertical is the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, which will be a common single point regulator for the higher education sector. It includes general education, professional education, and teacher education. But it excludes medical and legal education, which have different sets of regulatory scenarios. And it eliminates the duplication of regulatory efforts. So again, NHERC, the National Higher Education Regulatory Council, will be set up to regulate a light but tight and facilitative manner. I've explained what that means. And it includes matters, particularly financial probity, good governance, and things like that. So this is first vertical relating to overall regulation. The second vertical is connected with quality. Accrediting body called the National Accreditation Council, NAC. National Accreditation Council, different from NAC, NAAC, which will be a part of NAC. So the overall accrediting body, which is called the Meta Accrediting Body, is called the National Accreditation Council. First is the Regulation Council, second is the Accreditation Council. It is a major activity. At the moment, in technical education, we have NBA, National Board of Accreditation, and NAAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which also deals with general education. Because we have such a large number of institutions, we have about 4,000 engineering colleges. So accrediting them on a regular basis, every 3 years or every 4 years or 5 years, which is a major activity. So it has to be decentralized. You have to give the responsibility to a large number of institutions or bodies or agencies. And this, therefore, is a big responsibility. So under TechWeb, one of the major initial steps was that every institution must announce an institutional development plan, IDP, but it must set for itself goals which they want to achieve in a specific period and with the allocation of a specific amount of resources. So here again, it is indicated, it is not under TechWeb, but it is a general principle that every institution must announce an institutional development plan. And it is a bottoms-up exercise. All the faculty members, and including other stakeholders, for example, the employers of your students, all of you must come together and then announce this. And then here the time period is 15 years. They expect that the highest level of accreditation. What this means is that in NAC, for example, you have A++, A+, and some things like that, a large amount of classifications. In NBA, you have either accreditation for 5 years or 3 years. Originally, we had ABC. So internationally, globally, the practice is that either you're accredited or you're not accredited. That is the binary system. So, and highest level is, of course, getting accreditation. In India, for example, under NBA, it's a 5-year accreditation. Therefore, the IDPs must indicate how to reach the highest level of accreditation in the Indian context. But in the long run, we'll also move to the international practice, which is a binary process. Third vertical, it relates to funding and grants. It is the Higher Education Grants Council, HEGC. Imagine that it is a larger version of UGC, the University Grants Commission. And the fourth vertical is the General Education Council, which will frame the expected learning outcomes for higher education programs. These learning outcomes are very common in engineering, international practice. They're also referred to as graduate attributes. If you have NBA accreditation, if you have studied international accreditation practices, you will understand what this means. So learning outcomes or graduate attributes. And at the moment, we have, fortunately, a National Skills Qualifications Framework, NSQF. This exists in many countries, but the good models for this NSQF is, for example, Australia or the UK, and there are many other European countries which have this. Similarly, a new National Higher Education Qualification Framework will also be formulated. I think it's a very good recommendation. These two work together to enhance the skills, the talents, the employability of the students and so on. And at the moment, we have a large number of professional councils. I'm sure many of you are members of some of these councils. The Indian Council for Agricultural Research, Veterinary Council, National Council for Teacher Education, and Council of Architecture, and so on. Many of you are familiar with these things. We will now be designated as professional standard-setting bodies, and they will play an advisory role to the educational system in the country. So at the moment, for example, Council of Architecture, Pharmacy Council of India, they have regulatory responsibilities. In the new system, they will have an advisory responsibility, but they will not have any regulatory role. This also, I think, is a welcome recommendation. A very important part of the policy is curbing commercialization of education, particularly in the private sector. We have seen the evolution of these curbs over the years. For example, many years ago, they used to have a capitation fee, and it was a big effort to reduce or eliminate the capitation fee. But this phenomenon still exists today. So here, several measures are proposed to curb the commercialization of education by demanding that the standards of audit and disclosure to be taken into account. And in India, professional education, for example, or education in general, is a not-for-profit process. Whereas in the United States, for instance, there are institutions which are for-profit and they are doing quite well, and they find that it is essential in the educational system, overall educational system. But in our country, education is a not-for-profit enterprise. You must remember that. Therefore, there are many legal measures, and here there are the regulatory measures to make sure that there is no commercialization of education. Particularly, this is of importance in the political sphere. Many parties, when political parties, they are very sensitive to this aspect, and they want to make sure that the general public gets education without paying any capitation fee. So if there is any surplus, that means during the functioning of the institution, there is an excess of income over expenditure, which will happen in many institutions, then it should be reinvested in the educational sector. That is the essential principle. Effective governance and leadership, these two together, as I pointed out a little earlier, they actually determine the excellence of the institution, their ability to perform as a globally ranked institution. Therefore, many suggestions have been made. I do not know if we were a TechWhip institution. There is a green book we produced. That is the governance handbook. What are the principles of governance and how you should actually implement these policies. It is an excellent handbook which describes the functions of the Board of Governors or the Governing Council and how the members should be selected, how it should function in order to make sure that the institution practices ethical behavior and also it moves towards a higher level of excellence, continuous quality improvement. So these two are stressed in this policy. Professional education, which is an important part of the overall education sector, it deals with the professions, for example, our engineers, doctors, and so on. And the ethics is stressed to be an important component of this professional education. A whole lot of ideas are indicated here. Particularly since the pandemic became a hindrance to the delivery of education, we have been using online and digital education. And I'm sure the meeting we are having at the moment, this uses digital technology. Whereas under normal circumstances, I would have traveled to your institution and then addressed the institute of the student and the faculty members and other stakeholders. So this has become a reality. Online and digital education is now accepted as more or less the norm. So there are three types of use of this online and digital education. One is blended learning, which means that for the same cohorts, you give both offline and online education, same cohorts. Then you have hybrid education, which basically means you provide this education through the online means and offline means to a large number of stakeholders, students, not the same set of students, but different sets of students. Some of them may use offline, some of them use online, some of them may use both online and offline. This has become a reality. You're making use of it. Many other institutions are making use of it. However, there is a deep digital divide. Not every student or the faculty member has equal access to digital technology. Particularly, you deal with rural areas where the digital technology components are not present to the same extent as the urban areas. They are at a loss. So how do you make up the gap of rural and urban students to ensuring equitable use of technology, which is useful to all levels of students and teachers? At the moment, we have a large number of learning platforms. We have SWAYAM, which is a Hindi acronym, stands for Study Webs of Active Learning for Young Aspiring Minds. Essentially, it is a massive open online course, MOOCs platform. So more facilities will be available through this platform. There is another platform called Diksha, which is a teacher-friendly, teacher-enabling platform. So again, more effort will be, it requires digital technology, it requires software also. So these will be provided and there will be a different body which takes care of how this equity is established in these platforms. Digital divide I spoke about. Essentially what it means is different sections of populations do not have the same access to digital technology. And educational programs will be made available 24/7 in different languages. Imagine the tremendous challenges that we are up against to cater to the different sections of population. In education, apart from pedagogy, apart from delivery, apart from the curricula, assessment is extremely important. The certification that makes them employable and that makes them, eligible for employment in different sectors. Therefore, there is going to be a new NTA, National Testing Agency, and individual institutions and the courses online assessment and examinations. It is again a very serious issue. Imagine we used to give examinations in an examination hall. Students sit at different tables, and then we have invigilators to make sure that no fraud occurs and no copying occurs. So how do you do this when you give online assessment and examinations? Many efforts have been made to make sure, for example, you can use cameras, and those of you who have been exposed to GRE and other competitive examinations, you know how the examinations are administered to make sure that they are fair and transparent. So similarly, many ideas have been proposed and many efforts have been made. And the overall strategy is called PARAC, Performance, Assessment, Review, and Analysis for Holistic Development. That is the acronym which includes all the kinds of strategies. So blended models of learning, as I pointed out, for the same set of students, different methods of teaching. Flipped learning is a sub-part of this blended learning, where the student, he studies on his own at home, and then when he comes to the class, then discussions take place, debates take place about the content of what he has to learn. So these have been found to be very effective means of enhancing learning. Okay, so much for the policy. Now, you may have several policies, but unless you take special efforts to make them happen, then you have not reached your goals. So one of the ways of doing this, they have strengthening the Central Advisory Board of Education, the apex body for policy making within the ministry, and financing affordable and quality education for all, and then the different levels of implementation. We'll take a look at the different levels of implementation. What kind of ideas will get you success, which make you successful in implementation? Why many policies they fail? What are the reasons for the failure and why we should avoid them? Now, before that, I will also spend a little bit of time on the impressions of our Prime Minister when he released the policy, and also some ideas of the chairman of the policy committee, Dr. K. Kasturirangan. So both of them I'll bring in to give you a flavor of what the people at the top think about the policy difference, policy changes. The Prime Minister pointed out there's a big difference from the old education policies. He said the NEP 2020 focuses on how to think as opposed to what to think. The process of how we should think in order to achieve higher goals. So the policy is research and technology focused. The focus again is of quality education, and he quoted the dream of Abdul Kalam when he said in a speech that he wanted to fulfill his dream of providing education to make. What is the purpose of education? Kalam pointed out that it was to make quality human beings. It's an abstract concept, but it implies a whole lot of things. Quality human beings. So we may use technology, but then ultimately the idea is to produce or transform people into quality human beings. So he stressed that point. Then again, teachers, the importance of teachers. He pointed out that the cliche, when a teacher learns and teaches, the nation leads. Therefore, the importance on teacher. He also wanted the higher education institute. We have several of them, the IITs, the NITs, IIMs, and so on, to lead the others to a better education system. So you are being provided a whole lot of resources and so on. Resources are of three kinds. Human resources, most important. Physical resources, your labs, your computers, and so on. And financial resources, which is very important. So all of them have been provided to you in good quantity. Therefore, you must now start leading the others. So your Margadarshan Institute is a part of this policy. Classes in mother tongue, which is a very sensitive topic. The committee, Kasturirangan committee, they actually looked at some studies on how learning occurs in young students, for example. And they have suggested that the instruction should be until class 5th in the mother tongue, the regional language or the mother tongue. So there seems to be some scientific basis for making this suggestion, classes in mother tongue. But the matter does not end there. It is a highly sensitive political issue. More or less in most of the states, the 3-language formula is accepted. Hindi, English, and the regional languages. But already one state, which is a sensitive state, Tamil Nadu, it has rejected this policy. They would like to have it only in English and the regional language. They do not want Hindi. You remember the political transformation of Tamil Nadu took place during the anti-Hindi agitation. So it is a very sensitive issue for them. Multiple exit option. So this is what our Prime Minister said during the release of this policy. According to the chairman of the committee, there were a few magazines and news reporters, journalists, who asked him very pointed questions on several aspects. So his answers to these aspects tells us the motive for making many changes. The previous policy was announced 34 years ago. So what are the main objectives of a revamp of the entire structure? Because they have made very exhaustive and comprehensive transformational suggestions. So why do we do it? What are the major objectives of the new set of policies? So he said that education system is a dynamic system. Therefore, it cannot remain static as it was originally. Many changes have taken place in the environment, in the technology of teaching, in the content of the courses and so on. Therefore, we should keep in tune with the changes that have taken place. That's why we have made these changes. So they pointed out there should be an open-minded approach to education. What does that mean? So he points out that education cannot be in watertight compartments. There needs to be diversity because today there are so many opportunities, so many diverse issues have come up, and therefore we need to have an open-minded approach to accept the changes that are required and to accept the changes that are being suggested. A major recommendation is to allow foreign universities to set up campuses in India. Complete U-turn from the policy of the UPI government, where for many reasons, some of them are quite valid, essentially because they felt that it will be, the expenses will increase, and how will the lower middle class and the middle class afford to pay the fees for the foreign university education. But the question was wrong in that they asked, will the powerful private university lobby allow it to be implemented? That's, I think, is a wrong question. It's not the private universities which accept or reject it, it is the stakeholders. The answer was that we're not talking about opening foreign direct investment to any foreign university. We'll choose the universities to be the top 100 in global rankings and world-class Ivy League institutions. Only they will be permitted to or encouraged to set up institutions in India. This is basically because they are institutions of excellence, and we should be open. We should open our minds to excellence. You know, Russia, for example, they also allow foreign collaboration, but they insist, like we used to, before the policy, we used to insist that they should be in the top 100. The institutions should be top 100 in any of the global rankings. Essentially, not mediocre institutions to come to India, but only institutions of excellence. Then the question was the number of seats in nationally important institutions like IITs, etc. So they are too few for an institute, for an aspirational country like India. So we have about 20,000 seats in IITs and NITs in the country, whereas the population that requires education is much larger than that, a few lakhs. So if you increase the number of seats in these institutions of national importance, will it dilute quality? He points out that there is no question of diluting quality. We must enhance the quantity along with quality. So he points out that we have at the moment 900 or 1,000 universities under the UGC. And it is not just expansion, but it is to reconfigure the entire system. That's a reasonable answer. They also said that we have recommended that the IITs should become multidisciplinary. I believe it is not the right statement because IITs are already multidisciplinary. In a typical IIT, there are about 30 departments. What more do you want to point out to realize that they are already multidisciplinary? Kharagpur, for example, has medical education. Indian Institute of Science is beginning to include medical education under its umbrella. Therefore, anyway, this is a point that has been made. So this year, the language issue. NEP has emphasized that the mother tongue local language as medium of instruction up to class 5 or even 8. So won't Indian children be at a disadvantage in a globalized world due to lack of English? Many European countries where they have thrived with their local language, for example, Russian or German or French, and even Chinese, for instance, they have a large proportion of its education in the local language. But they also thrive in the English dominant world because they have either transformed into English. Originally, when Indians went to Germany, for instance, they had to learn the language and they had to study only in German language. But lately, over the past 15 years, 20 years, they have offered courses and programs in English. They have transformed it because English has been recognized to be a global language. Anyway, let us look at Dr. Kasturirangan's answer. He says that the fact is that ability to grasp in mother tongue is more in the formative years of a child's life. The brain responds to the mother tongue much better. It's quite a solid science evidence for that. So he points to the 3-language formula. So if the child from the beginning also learns English, then it is not a big disadvantage. In my personal case, for instance, I studied in Tamil Nadu. So until SSLC, which is grade 10 at the moment, we studied even science and mathematics in the local language. But we made the transition to English, which was a little bit of a difficult challenge, but we all did that. This is the same with many other states also. I know many of my friends who have studied in Andhra Pradesh, who have studied in Maharashtra, for instance. They learn even science and mathematics in local language, but they make the transition. So yeah, the 3-language formula will enable this, but all states are not in agreement with this. Teachers are the most important pillars of an education system. So what have we done for teacher education? First of all, he points out that at the moment we have several teachers training institutes, and that is where the teachers are trained, both B.Ed as well as in engineering and polytechnic education and so on. So he said that it will be a part of the overall general education system, and therefore there will be a possibility of enhancing the capacity. Rote learning is a problem. Yes, it is a problem. So here he talks about assessment. So the so-called formative assessment and summative assessment. We all have converted ourselves into formative assessment. That means there is not only one examination at the end of the year or the semester examination. There are in between several tests which are given, and the assessment takes into account the overall performance in the different tests and examinations. So that is a way of handling this issue. Then the next question is about world-class research. and he makes an admission. I'm sure the universities will be quite upset about this. And he says, at present, research in our universities are highly unsatisfactory, and I must say it is dismal. We had a workshop many years ago on engineering education. We came through almost the same conclusion. For example, better quality research is done in research labs, for example, the DST labs, the CSIR labs, and so on, rather than in universities for many reasons. At the moment, the situation is getting improved. There is more of high quality research opportunities given to universities, and their publications and citations have completely improved. So the answer is, of course, the National Research Foundation will tackle these issues. I mentioned Mansukh Bhargava. He was one of the architects of the plan. He works at Princeton University. He's a Fields Medal winner. Fields Medal is the equivalent of Nobel Prize in sciences, and it is given for mathematics because there is no Nobel Prize for mathematics. So he spent a considerable amount of time helping the NEP policymakers, and he brought into focus the words interdisciplinary education and multidisciplinary education. So in my view, I'll quickly finish in another 10 minutes. So in my view, what is the purpose of a national education policy? It is to review the past and chart out a future, because the global environment is changing and the national aspirations are changing. This is to achieve our national aspirations. I'll give you examples of major changes which have taken place because of national education policy. The 86-91 policy, it combined for the first time technical and management education. Management education was coming to the fore. And it created AICTE in 1987 and the accreditation system for quality assurance in 1994. So this did not exist before. It is because of the policy that these things have come into reality. They have been realized. Therefore, they have major impact which can be made. I again summarized the major goals of NEP. I'll again look at this three types of universities they have pointed out, combining research and teaching in different proportions. Type 1 with primary focus on research, type 2 focusing on both research and teaching, and type 3 focusing on teaching at the moment, which are the affiliated colleges. They also make a case for liberal studies to the extent of about 25%. At the moment, we have in engineering 15% liberal studies. This includes engineering ethics, environment, science and technology, civics, constitution, sustainability, and so on. The point is, if you are producing a technologist or an engineer, you cannot offer him a whole lot of liberal studies and expect him to practice technology. 15% is required as a means of giving the touch of socio-economic knowledge to the engineering student. However, he needs to specialize in engineering and technology. There are some additional points. Okay. I'll spend a little bit of time on this GDP. We say that we need to give funds to the extent of 6% of GDP. Now, enhanced funds are required to achieve enhanced GER, the growth enrollment ratio. Now, 6% is an overall measure, but then if you look at the details, there is sector-wise budgetary allocation to achieve enhanced GER. There are sector school education, higher education, vocational education. How do you allocate the overall 6% into these three sectors? What are the contributions of state government and central governments? What are the requirements of teachers and infrastructure? Public versus private sector contributions. Therefore, looking deeper into the different components of GDP, there's a whole lot of details one has to take into account. Such 6%, how to distribute it among the different sectors, it's a very important decision. The implementation issue, I'll spend about 10 minutes on this. Pointer, first of all, unless you implement what you are suggesting as policy, your goals will not be reached, your results will not be attained. There are many trade-offs. For example, quantity and scaling up, merit and equity. Merit, even in admissions, we come across these issues. Now the country needs finances for health, particularly in the pandemic, post-pandemic situation. Hopefully it's post-pandemic. Health, environment, infrastructure, and defense. How do you distribute the total amount of money available to these different sectors, and how much will be available for education? At the moment, the allocation for the education is only about 1 to 2% or maybe 3%. Education is a highly resource-intensive sector. We must, they were talking about faculty crunch. At the moment, teachers are not respected to the extent that we used to many years ago. We used to respect our teachers. Teaching must become a respectable profession. Teaching profession. Unless you provide respect to teachers, they will not be motivated or incentivized to give of their best. Governance we spoke about, and TechWhip Good Governance Guide is an example of what things to be done or what you should do things, how you should select your boards of governors and things like that. And because engineering and technology are practical professions, we must make sure there is a symbiotic and synergistic relation between the university sector and the industry sector. They must come together, particularly in skill development. And this is my last set of slides. Reality check on NEP 2020. Reality check essentially means how good are the recommendations in terms of implementation. 6 major challenges in implementing. Now, if you want to enhance the GER to the extent of 50% from the present 25 or 30%, you need to open one new university every week for the next 15 years. Is that a practical way of doing things? It will not happen. I mean, let us be quite clear about it. Therefore, we will not achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. And people want to say, from government, for example, that they want to achieve the goals with even less than 15 years. Within 10 years, we want to achieve this. How will you achieve it? You can only talk about it. You can only put up public statements. In the school system, what does that mean? It means that we need to open around 50 schools every week. Is that practical? Funding is a big challenge in the COVID and post-COVID era because we have several other challenges. Healthcare and economic recovery, the funds required for them will lower the execution speed. Need to create a large pool of trained teachers. You cannot create teachers in a hurry. You cannot have a 5-year plan to create double the number of teachers you have. Again, it is an impossible challenge, but you have to undertake that challenge. Interdisciplinary higher education demands a cultural shift. In your own university, for example, you must break the barriers between different departments. You must allow the silos to open up, and interdepartmental, interdisciplinary education and research efforts you must promote. Then they are talking about multiple exit and entry points. Some efforts are being made. It's again a new cultural issue. We are not used to doing this. Then the way they are planning to do this multidisciplinary is giving certificates or diplomas, a bachelor's degree. Put yourself in the minds of employers. Will they accept these classifications without going into details? Academic Bank of Credit, that's an excellent arrangement. You can take credits from different institutions and put them together, add and give degrees depending upon the requirements. National Testing Agency, now this is, again, work in progress. And allowing foreign universities, campuses in India, it requires new regulations and new ways of doing things, new agencies to be set up. At the moment, there are a few foreign universities in India, their campuses are in India, achieving 50%, including vocational education by 2035. Is that a realistic goal? One must study that. National professional standards for teachers to be laid down by 2022. Some efforts have started. How long it will, by 2022? No, the 2022 is already here. Establishment of National Research Foundation. This is a rather easy task to undertake. Work is in progress and very soon this will be achieved. And one suggestion is also that expert groups should be constituted with the following terms of reference. I've indicated that these are details. And many times policies may be good, but implementation of the policies are highly unsuccessful. It is the basic reason is weak execution, implementation problems. Again, many times things do not happen as you wish them to happen because of overly optimistic expectations. Our current policy directions, they are very highly optimistic expectations. In my state, for example, they want to do it in less time than what has been proposed. I do not know whether people have understood the goals that need to be achieved. Implementation in dispersed governance, we have different sectors, the state and the government. Already there are some issues, as I pointed out in the language issue. Inadequate collaborative policy making and vagaries of the political cycle. If the new government comes, then many things change. A lot of things change. So they also point out that the PM's task force on higher education reforms should be facilitated. A national NEP implementation standing committee, including, for example, the leaders of higher education institutions. And then National Education Ministers Council. The state education ministers must come together under the umbrella of the National Education Ministry, and then they must coordinate the efforts. Integrating institutions of eminence with NEP. As you know, 10 institutions in the private sector and 10 institutions in the public sector, they have been identified as institutions of eminence with higher capabilities and higher resources to be given to them. They should come together to assist the implementation, and the National Higher Education Philanthropy Council. And therefore, ultimately, there is a whole lot of things to be done. We need to create stakeholder initiatives and sound principles of management which are required to manage this project as any other nationally important project. Therefore, it's a huge challenge. But then there are many details which are given to us on how to do this. And implementation. That's a mantra for achieving the results. So let me stop here. It has been a little longer than anticipated. Okay, thank you. Any questions? I would like to
thank you very much, sir.
Field them. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, sir. Indeed, it's a very pragmatic and practical presentation. We loved it. And now, sir is open for question and answers. So anyone having any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hands. We will allow you to speak. Please.
Ma'am, one of the participants has raised the hand. You can check it.
Okay. Silu Malik, please. I've unmuted you. Silu Malik.
Maybe he has by miss he has done that. Yes, sir. Ma'am, if you can allow me, can I come with my query?
Yes, please. Please, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. It was a learning nearly 1.5 hours. Though we had gone through all this, but the way you have explained it is quite wonderful. I just want to know, can you emphasize on the innovation and the entrepreneurship part, which has been highlighted through this NEP 2020? So can you please highlight on those?
Yes, I will. See, there is a complementary effort by the Department of Science and Technology, the Science and Engineering Research Board. They have come up with an STIP, Science, Technology, Innovation, So policy. So they have much more detailed descriptions of how to promote innovation in all sectors, including the university sector. As of now, there is the AICTE effort on Atal labs, innovation promotion labs. So it is through the grassroots efforts for promoting innovation all the way from the school sector to the higher education sector. And there have been many successful efforts in our country. For example, we have a few unicorn entrepreneurs. Therefore, we are succeeding and a lot of effort is being put. And the idea is that new ways of thinking, new ways of making things, the Make in India effort is another major policy initiative. So enough is being done as far as I'm concerned to promote innovation. Efforts are there. The success will be achieved in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Gulami has raised hand. Gulami, please unmute yourself and say your question. Please put your question. Gulami, are you there? Sangram just raised hand. Sangram, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Or feel free to put it in the chat box so that I can read it out to sir. Is there?
Excuse me.
Yes. Sangram.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
I thanks the professor to give so many information. I have one question, sir. We are talking about enhancement of education, hybrid education, collaborative education, all these things. But still we renovate our educational policy and all these things. But during the globalization or collaboration, can we spare our basic value and ethics? That means, is it not a dilute our education standard of our own country when we focused towards the collaboration and other foreign university, etc.? In that case, there should be a standard guideline in the national education policy. The Indian culture and base value, it should not minimum value, its weightage should be there.
In other words, what exactly would you like to be included in our school and college curricula? What would you like to be included representing Indian culture?
That means, sir, our basic Indian civilization, Indian standard of education, while blindly accepting the foreign university syllabus, curriculum, etc., there should be a minimum norms there for every industry, whether it is a foreign dean university or government university. So the collaboration on the basis of minimum parameter, basing upon the Indian civilization and Indian educational previous education, that should be there.
Now you're talking about collaboration. As of now, the instruction in technology, instruction in science and arts, they are based on the curricula set up by the model curricula given by the AICTE for professional education and UGC for general education. These are based on our own culture, our own ideas and so on. But technology is global in nature. Science is also global in nature. The collaboration comes after we have made efforts to teach the basics from our own policy-making bodies, namely UGC and AICTE. And that is what you are following in your own courses, for instance. And we have instruction in ethics, we have instruction in our constitution, our environment and so on. These are essentially our ideas. Collaboration comes subsequently when you identify a partner who you think will benefit, who will benefit us. So the focus is on us. So it is not a foreign idea, it's a set of ideas. It is our own ideas. But technology is global in nature. Nothing is lost.
Sir, my question is, there may be some regional issue and there may be some need-based technology forecasting depending upon state to state. In that case, to meet the challenge, we have to collect the idea, innovative idea, and also local challenge. And basing upon that, there should be a continuous feedback analysis and continuous evaluation after adopting the new education policy, so that we can target, we can evaluate how much extent we achieve.
Once you have studied the basics, then the regional issues can be taken up through, for example, projects. They can be taken up through collaboration with the state government. If there is a coastal area, then projects relating to the naval issues, the fisheries, for example, how to improve the technology of different aspects relating to the coastal technologies, coastal areas, problems, they can be taken up. That is at a local issue. Therefore, I do not see how our culture is lost in this process.
Sir, one more question. The research and collaboration activity, it should not be limited within the campus of the university.
Absolutely true. That is why you must take up national issues, regional issues through projects offered by Department of Science and Technology, AICT itself, for example. There is a research component. So there is definitely a lot of scope for undertaking these studies. There is no loss. And the national education policy is not preventing you from taking up local issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sangram, sir. Sir, we have a question from Professor Tanmay. Is there any specific set of criteria for multiple entry and exit? And what are the means required for having the exit?
This is a general principle which has been stated, and study groups are working on how to implement these suggestions. But the general principle is that provide an opportunity for learners to leave the educational scene for 2 years, go through the educational scene for 2 years, then drop out is not the right word. Exit, and for doing something different, maybe an entrepreneurship effort, particularly family-related business, for instance. They might want to make use of the first 2 years' knowledge to promote the family business, for example, and then having practiced what you have learned in the first 2 years, come back to advance your knowledge, be in a better position to learn more in order to do your the career that you have taken in a much more effective fashion. As I said, that it has a lot of intricate issues on, for example, if he leaves the first two, at the end of first 2 years, and when he comes back, let us say after 2 years, during these years, the first 2 years, the knowledge would have advanced. Or how do you make up for this gap? So these are issues which have to be looked at. Many committees have been set up, a whole lot of committees have been set up. Many educational institutions, universities have been asked to hold consultations, webinars, internal brainstorming sessions, and so on, to come up with ideas. To collecting these ideas and incorporate them into the policy transformation, that is a huge issue. So things are on the move, but the finality has not been reached.
Thank you, sir. So we have a follow-up question, like what is the academic credit band? Is it intra-university or intra-institute or across the university? If across university, is there any benchmark for this?
It's taken. You see, the whole concept is based on the modular form of instruction. For example, you take, if it is required to achieve 120 credits for the degree program, then you take a different number of credits from different institutions. For example, the NIT next to you or KIT, which is next to you, take some credits from there. If you break up the whole program into credits, this becomes easy because they are recognized certification of levels of learning. So 60 credits from C.V. Raman University, let us say 40 credits from KITS, and in the next NIT that you have, the rest of the credits. And a credit equivalence has to be established. Once that is done, this bank will just act like a financial bank. It will collect these credits of different, for example, in IITs, for instance, and I'm sure it exists in other institutes, the whole range of subjects are classified under different categories. For example, social sciences, basic sciences, and so on. So you must have so many credits from technology, so many credits from projects, so many credits from so on. And they add them together, even though all of them are not of the same type, but then establishing the equivalence and adding them together to achieve the overall 120 or 180 credits. And that entitles you to get the degree from the base university. It's a meta university system.
Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, a few queries has come to my inbox, if you can allow me.
Please.
The participant Gulmi Chakrabarti has put that if the parents move from one state to another because of the 3 language policy, the kids suffers a lot. So what's your take on that, sir?
Again, I believe that an agreement must be reached between the different institutions and different universities in order to accept the credits which are acquired from one institution to be added to the rest of the things. For example, if you have collaboration with another country, for instance, again, you have to establish equivalence. If the credit that he earns with you is not of the same value as the credit in their own institution, in the collaboration will not accept the addition of these 2 sets of credits. Similarly, from different states.
Yes, sir. If somebody is here in Odisha, going through Odia in primary level, he or she moves to Tamil Nadu. So the kid has to go for their local language. She's talking about that. So can you find a way out how kids should not suffer on that?
That's a challenge. I do not have an answer.
Okay. And so one more query from the participant Arindam Maji. Sir, what should be our mindset going forward while taking unconventional paths like startup, etc.?
These are opportunities and possibilities. It depends upon your own mindset, in the sense that, for example, do you want, when graduates, they go for placement, do you look at their desire to proceed further in their career? Some of them want to join an existing company or an institution. Some of them want to start their own institution. Some of them want to go for higher education. It depends upon his analysis of the possibility which will give him the maximum benefit. So it is a highly individualistic kind of a situation, even between employment and higher education, for example.
Thank you, sir. Sir, student Biswajit.
Ma'am, I think Professor Tanmay wants to come in. I just allowed him to unmute. Okay. Sir, please go ahead. Sir, please go ahead. Sir, I have allowed you, sir. You can please come. Yes, sir.
Sir, I will continue the same question, that if there is a academic credit bank and it has been allowed to take it from any university, then is there any specific criteria to be set for the university where we can take the credit? And second is, as there are evaluation processes different from university to university and institute to institute, then will it not impact
In what sense will it impact?
Sir, say suppose the evaluation process is different. Then the credit occurred, and say suppose in some university 80 mark is equivalent to E grade, and in some university may 75 is equivalent to E grade. Say for example, then this will later on hamper on the overall CGPA.
Once you have inter-institution transfer of credits, there must be acceptability of equating the different credits. So it is a basic policy matter. So how do you accept? Obviously, it is not exactly equal. It is an equivalence that you establish by accepting the procedures of different institutions. So that is a policy matter. It has been achieved. In Meta University, it's already existed over the past 5 years. Therefore, different institutions, inter-institutional transfer has been accepted.
And suppose a student get failed after taking one of the credit from one of the university, then again it will be a burden to the student because the same course may not be floated in the next semester. It may come up after 1 year.
What problem will come up after 1 year?
Sir, say suppose a candidate who has taken a course from other university, and by some means he or she is not able to appear the examination or get failed in that subject.
No.
Then consequently the back examination may be held after 1 year.
No, this is an individual case that you're talking about. There must be broad acceptance of equivalence. If you don't have it, you cannot enter this kind of a additive system. And it has been done. Policymakers will sit together and agree what a credit means in each institution. And for this credit to be equated to another credit from another institution, there must be equivalence criteria which have to be established. For example, there are a number of institutions in India which have twinning programs with other institutions abroad. And they have come to a conclusion and degrees are granted. So it's a standard issue which has been tackled and which has been solved.
Yeah. And sir, another point there is that there is a flexibility in the appearing the examination from the student side. The flexibility in appearing the examination, that whenever they want, they can appear the examination.
This is a detail. I don't think we can discuss this detail.
Yes, sir. Tanmay sir, we will take it one-on-one differently.
Sure.
Okay. With last question, there are a few questions, but we will be forwarding the questions to you later on, sir. We will end up with last question. A student wants to know, Vishwajit, like what is the scope and opportunity of sports culture in this NEP? Do you have any opportunity further or not?
There are details of accommodating sports and arts and culture and so on, but I'm not aware of the details. But there is definitely scope for taking this into consideration.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your presence.
Yeah, I just want to add one. First of all, sir, thanks for the wonderful overview. I know we have all read all the reports multiple times, but as Professor Gopalia mentioned, I mean, it's a huge and a very holistic overview in a very short time. And to all my colleagues, I would like to add that, see, whether it is with innovation, whether it is with credit transfer, as Professor Natarajan already mentioned, even between, our autonomy process enabled all of this. We have learned it over a period of how, if student comes from other institution, how do we put a pyramid, whether it's 75 or 80% equivalent course content, and the credit, equivalence committee approves it and all. So these are processes which in place. And similarly, as he also mentioned, as far as the regarding the science technology innovation policy clearly talks about, first of all, already our autonomy gives us the provision to, have our own choice of assignments and activity. Nothing stops us to work related to our local areas as also international areas to be mutually relevant to both so that we can collaborate on either way. And as he already mentioned, the science technology innovation policy especially puts special emphasis on policy, forecasting, analysis, and even creating of institutions in that forum also. So I think he has given a beautiful overview for all of us to relook at all of them, and also mentioned all the agencies. And similarly, even for implementation, as he mentioned, whether it is blended learning, whether it is assessment, whether it is academic credit transfer, academic bank of credits, reasonable documentation has already been put up with, as I mentioned, with expert committees working on it as to how we could adapt it. And plus, again, as he mentioned in the beginning, the key is autonomy and teacher autonomy. So it's up to us now to learn and understand and leverage it and deliver it. And there is no one shoe fit all, once a won't at all, but with some amount of standards. And so that is where the credit equivalence and all that is coming. But it's a huge opportunity for us. And I think we could not have got a better overview of all of such a complicated, and it's against thousands of pages of documentation if you look at it cumulatively. And so thanks once again for giving us such a succinct and brief but excellent overview, Professor Natarajan. And as I mentioned, I will have to say that most of the today top 200 institutions in NIRF or top 100 in NI, especially in engineering, and I think would have immensely benefited from his input and handholding from policy, as he especially emphasized about the governance and research and other active under TechCube. I think so much, and similarly in the NBA enabling has been done and with orientation. So I am sure whoever is now again our Margadarshak institutions would have got that. See, this is not, this was not only talking about NEP, but everything was equally looking at enabling or NBA or NAC process also. So I am sure we have immensely gained from it. But for the sheer lack of time, we couldn't take all the question. But he has also shared his PPT. We'll be happy to share with everybody so that you can go through it. Plus, maybe some of this content would be available for you all to look and relook and work on it. So I would once again like to thank Professor Natarajan personally from my side also for having accepted our invitation and kindly sparing your time and giving us such a wonderful overview, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for such kind words, sir. We are coming to the end of the event, and so I'm taking this opportunity to immensely thank Professor Natarajan for such pragmatic yet practical insights. You have shared a wonderful presentation, sir, and sparing such valuable time of yours. We are immensely grateful, sir. And a special thanks goes to our Vice Chancellor, sir, for enabling and facilitating such impactful events for us. And a sincere thank to all the honorable guest institutions under Margdarshak for their sincere participation and efforts. I heartily thank our respected deans, HODs, colleagues for their continuous supports and kind presence. And another special thanks goes to our dear students for their active participation. Thank you, each and everyone. I wish a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Namaste, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thanks. We will, I think people can now log out and we'll get back to you. Thank you very much once again, Professor Natarajan, for the wonderful talk.
Thank you, Satyanarayana.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jyoti ma'am. Can you please confirm, shall I close this meeting?
Yes, sir, we can close because we have already requested for the feedback form.
Okay.
And
great.
I don't see any other queries. So we can end it over here.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Great session, ma'am. Thank you.
Recording stopped.